What's up folks, and welcome back to EVERSPACE. Now some of you guys might recognise this one because I've covered this before, back when it was in early access. Well, the game's now been released and recently had a small DLC upgrade release called EVERSPACE Encounters. So the guys have reached out and sponsored me to make a few videos kind of on the DLC, but also giving me a bit of free roam to talk about what I like, give my own opinions and so on. I do of course need to mention that it is sponsored. And my plan's going to be to kind of recap what exactly EVERSPACE is all about, what's changed since it came out of early access, and then fill in a bit about what this DLC is going to add to sort of expand the gameplay. So if any of this takes your fancy, there's a link just down below in the video description to check out the game directly. And let's kick off with a bit of a recap, a bit of a look at what exactly EVERSPACE actually is. What's the game all about? Well, now it's released and has a story. In EVERSPACE you take on the role of Adam, a colonial pilot it seems that's suffering majorly from amnesia. All he knows is he's woken up in this ship and for whatever reason his friends are out to get him. He's now on the run for reasons unknown, with only the ship he's sitting in and a rather sarcastic AI called Hive to enable him to survive. And so as Adam you are constantly on the run, jumping from sector to sector and trying to make the most of the sector you're in before pursuing forces arrive to chase you out. Rather like Faster Than Light in that respect, but of course the gameplay is completely different. This is fast-paced action combat mixed in with a little bit of mining, a little bit of exploration, some crazy hulks and other things I've come across like the ancients that I kind of teased at the start of the video. I don't even know where that goes yet, I haven't found them again. But the idea is you're going to be travelling through these procedurally generated systems and trying to make the best you can of what resources are available. So most systems will be a collection of mineable locations where you can pick up different materials for crafting. There'll almost certainly be some outlaws or some Okkar, two of the pirate factions that you come across around in the area as well to fight. But then sometimes you come across more interesting stuff, like for example there are traders around the place that you can bump into. Some of them are even actual characters, which I'll get onto later but was added by the DLC. And then you've got spaceports, you've got weird and wonderful things to find. And your whole purpose is not just to prepare yourself for the next system or the next sector you jump into, which works very much like Faster Than Light with different pathways that lock you off from different options, but also to prepare yourself for your next run. This is very much a roguelite at heart, whereby anything you do in that run can potentially benefit later ones. For example, there is a blueprint system. So for this crafting, you can build certain things on certain ships to begin with. But then as you go through the game, play it more, you start unlocking further blueprints. They drop as loot in the game. And then next run, you can then build that right from the start as soon as you've got the materials. Crafting is of course not the only way to get stuff. There are plenty of piracy opportunities available out and about, right up to the point where if you really want to, you can go hostile with the friendly factions and just play a game through like that. Maybe they've got some good stuff. I haven't really had the balls to try that yet, if I'm honest. The few times I've ended up in a fight with the G&B, the friendly guys, they are pretty nasty. But you can go that route, or you can just explore for better guns, better equipment. Your ship comes equipped with basically a primary weapon. Some of the ships are allowed multiple. The ship I've been flying, this Sentinel, which was added in the DLC, actually only fits one main weapon, which you have to kind of get used to, but it maxes it up by having more options in the other slots. So you've got 4 slots. You've got your main weapon slot. Most ships have either multiple of these or sort of options there. There's actually a huge great gunship that you can play that has a turret instead of a normal main gun. Haven't tried that one out yet because you need to unlock it, but looks pretty interesting. And then you've got secondary weapons, which are sort of missiles, torpedoes that you can craft. Then you've got devices and sort of one-use consumables. And depending on how many slots your ship have, you can have a whole load of these things ranked up, and they can be really interesting. Stuff like setting off static fields around your ship, or I've got one equipped in this clip, which is a time extender. It slows down time, or as your sarcastic AI ends up telling you, actually what it does is speed you up to the point where you're maybe as intelligent as fast as he is. Anyway, a slight aside, but the comedy is definitely there in this one, which I quite like as well. It gives the universe a bit of life. But what this all means, of course, is that while there is definitely crafting and so on, your primary focus is on combat with a really slick system. No questions here. The craft control's great. It's very arcadey, of course, very Freelancer, but it means that they can do some fun things with it. You've got a lot of exploration and sort of dogfighting that happens in amongst wrecks and structures that would never work with a proper like Newtonian system, and it just makes it fun. It's one where you sit down, half an hour, 45 minutes for a run, unless you, I guess, doing really, really well. And at the end of that, you'll unlock a few perks, be ready for the next run, and that's been driving me quite a lot to go, oh, I've almost got that perk that means if I get back to my ship, I'll be able to get my main guns back, and my main guns by that point, they're probably going to be super upgraded, so if I take that perk and then just try and blast through the systems, don't collect too much, and then get back to my corpse, I'll be fine. And just to finish that entirely hypothetical story, I wouldn't advise it. You get to a little way in, and then you start running out of fuel, and then you try and get the fuel, and everything around you is really scary. Maybe not. Maybe it'll work for you. Who knows? Certainly not one that I'll be trying again. Anyway, moving on from that, one thing I mentioned earlier that I want to go back to was talking about characters, which was something the DLC added that I really quite like. Now, I've been having a lot of fun with the game, but early on I was starting to get a bit concerned that those first few systems you go through, basically sectors 1 and 2, which once you've got a few perks on your ship, you've got a better idea of what it is you're doing, you're going to get through relatively quickly, but you're going to have to do every time. And I was concerned that was going to start to get a bit dull, honestly. Going through the same things, through the same sectors, there might be a few different things there because of the procedural nature, but it's going to be essentially the same stuff, and you're going to get really used to it. Well, while that did kind of feel the case when I played it in early access, one of the things that's kind of dramatically changed that up is 5 characters that were added in encounters that you can just randomly come across. And I'll try and show you some footage of these guys, because they've all got their own kind of personality to them. I think my favourite so far is Maurice.
I'm not with the fleet, no, but you don't need to worry about me. Who are you exactly?
I'm exactly NR APS 4210, but please, call me Maurice.
He is clearly weird, but fun. And initially you'll just randomly make contact with them, and they start giving you missions. But these missions are persistent in that once you've met, say, Elec, and you've done a mission for him, he can just crop up again in any sort of system, and after a while you'll even unlock the perk that lets you know where they're gonna be. And each time you meet them, there's a different mission, there's something else to do. I mean, with Elec in particular, he's an outlaw pirate that happens to be friendly with you. And so a lot of what you do for him is to go and do stuff that's a bit shady. So there was one where I helped break into a base and take down a whole load of force fields and kill turrets and so on, solve some puzzles internally. And then he came along and went, aha, weapons for us, wonderful. Here's the leftovers, enjoy that. Or the second one, which I'll put the footage in the background here, where he wants you to raid some G&B cargo transports, and this is one of the ways I learned that you don't mess with the G&B. This did not last long. Those cargo transports are nasty, I was not ready for them. But those 5 add a whole bunch of, ironically, character to the game. In the just each time there's a little bit of a dash of story extra to it. Each time there's a little bit of dash of extra difference that might completely change how you decide to play it. So you look at the map and you go, oh, well, Maurice and Elec require me to go that way, but that way's got all sorts of natural occurrences and disturbances that could cause problems. It's really nasty. My threat level's super high for those. Ugh. Well, I guess I'm doing it. Hopefully I make it through. And I think things like that help to take a game that you could try and almost min-max. Once you played that first little bit over and over again, you know what you want to do. You're like, okay, so I'm going to go, well, I need to collect this, I'm going to build that, I'm going to jump through this system really fast, I'm going to get to the jump gate, blah, blah, blah. Except, all of a sudden, something's going to throw a cog in the works for that, because all of a sudden, Maurice has shown up and he wants you to go over there now. It's just enough to take what would start to feel like a regular flow and keep mixing it up to keep it interesting. Add in the procedural stuff and some of the weird things you can encounter as well, and it's keeping itself remarkably fresh even for the bits you've done before. Now, I did play it without the Encounters DLC first, did a few runs without it just to give myself a baseline, understand exactly what it looked like following release. And this is not to say that that wasn't an enjoyable experience, just that I like that extra bit of character that those 5 dudes have added in, especially as they're all really quite different. You've got traders, you've got assassins, you've got pirates. It's a nice mix of different types of missions to be doing, and a nice little addition on top of what had otherwise been very much driven by what you wanted to do. Now there's someone else's interests involved at times too. Now, what I can't talk about yet is exactly what it's like to get deep into the game. I've gone as far as Sector 4, I think, maybe Sector 5. So, I'm a decent distance in, but as I understand it, I've really only started to scratch the surface as far as the sort of fights you get in, the sort of things you come up against. I've fought the odd corvette, which is a much larger sort of capital ship. But as I understand it, there are full-on destroyers and stuff that you just do not want to meet later on. So I'm looking forward to seeing a bit further, and to come back and talk a bit about what that's all about. I think I might come back and kind of do a follow-up to this that shows off some of the more interesting encounters you can get in with the new DLC guys, or show off exactly what happens with those ancients if I can find them again, because that fight was really cool once I figured out what was going on. Speaking of which, the way this fight ends, I'm going to put it back on, and you guys might think, he's getting his ass kicked here. And the answer is yes, I am most definitely getting my ass kicked. I'm not sure if it's because the Tesla cannons I'm using, which are really cool in a lot of circumstances, they jump to nearby enemies. So some of the ships that have got like little shield drones around them, for example, you have to kill first, you just shoot the main ship and watch all of the drones explode at once. That is hilarious, but seem really weak against these ancients. So on the verge of death and not wanting to kind of miss this opportunity, I had been given by a kindly passerby, who I think is one of those characters, an Arc 9000, which is one of the new weapons, and is some think BFG basically, but projectile based. So you shoot this thing out, it lightnings anything around it, and then explodes with a huge bang. So I took that thing down, thought, ooh, wormhole, let's go into it, that's got to be the plan, and yeah, game over. But I believe that Tesla gun, in fact I'm certain the Tesla gun, because it's equipped on the new ship, and I think it's the only one that can actually make them as standard from blueprints, but also that crazy missile are some of the new stuff, weapon and equipment wise, that the DLC added in. And I'm certainly intrigued to go and try that stuff out. Maybe that's what's going to help me with the Destroyers later game, get a whole bunch of those things available. But hey, now I've just devolved into telling stories basically. I think that'll do for this one, guys. Give you a bit of a recap on what EVERSPACE is all about, talked a bit about what the DLC's added, and now I'm going to come back with, I think, a couple more videos. I want to do one video that is showing you what some of this super endgame stuff looks like. I want to go and find a destroyer to fight or something like that. And then I want to do one video specifically talking about a new mode they added called Hardcore Mode, which I think is a really interesting sort of rewriting of how the game works. But I think I'll leave that specifically for its own video, because it really does change things up a bit. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this one, bit of a recap. If you did, please hit that like button, really does help me and the channel out. If you didn't, dislike button's right next door. And otherwise, thanks a lot for watching, folks. I will catch you for the next one.